Everyone in the town of Oakhaven knew that the old clock tower was a little strange. Its hands moved backward. Its chimes sounded minor and out of tune, and no one knew why it was even there in the first place. But despite all its oddities, the townspeople loved their backwards clock and were fiercely protective of it. That was until the day young Billie Eilish climbed the clock tower to fix its broken weather vane and accidentally broke the clock's pendulum. Now, with the town's most beloved landmark out of commission, the townspeople were in a panic. They needed a new clock, but where could they find one that ticked just as slow and backwards as the old one? And more importantly, what secret did that old clock hold that made it so special to the people of Oakhaven? To find the answers, we'll have to go back in time to when the clock first arrived in Oakhaven. It had been a gift to the town from a mysterious benefactor who only revealed himself as a traveling clockmaker. He told the townspeople that the clock was not just any clock, but a special clock that would allow them to, quote, measure time in a different way. Of course, everyone thought he was a bit crazy, but the clock was free, so no one stopped him from installing it in the town square. At first, the townspeople were confused by the clock's backwards ticks, but soon they began to enjoy its quirks and made it a part of their everyday lives. They learned to set their watches and plan their days around the clock's backwards ticks, and before long, it became an integral part of the town's identity. In fact, the townspeople became so attached to the clock that they rebuilt it several times after storms, and once when a group of vandals set it on fire. But the clockmaker never returned to Oakhaven after he installed the clock, leaving the townspeople to wonder about the meaning behind its backwards ticks and the reason for its strange chimes. Some said that the clock was cursed, while others claimed that it was haunted by the ghost of the clockmaker, who had died in a tragic accident. But the truth was much simpler than anyone in Oakhaven imagined. You see, the clock didn't tick backwards because it was cursed or haunted. It was simply counting down. The clock's pendulum was on swinging back and forth like other clocks because it had a broken gear inside of it, and that gear had a very special shape. You see, every gear in the clock tower was perfectly round except for this one, which had 60 small indentations carved into it. Every time the gear turned, those 60 teeth would line up with 60 tiny pegs on the pendulum's arm, and when they did, it would stop the arm from swinging and reset it for the next minute. But because the gear was oddly shaped, the pendulum couldn't swing freely, so it swung backwards. And when the clockmaker crafted this gear, he also made sure that each indentation was precisely the same size and shape as the space between two piano wires, and when the wires were struck, they produced musical tones. Unfortunately, the wires had been stretched so tight that they were nearly impossible to make resonate, so the only time the clock chimed properly was at midnight when the temperature dropped and the wires tightened. But the clock wasn't just counting down the minutes. Each gear in the clock represented a different measurement of time. The smallest gear measured seconds, while the largest measured years, and when the clock was fully repaired, it revealed exactly how much time the townspeople had left. They had less than a year left to live according to the clock, and that's why the clockmaker had given them this gift. He wanted to give the townspeople a precise measurement of how much time they had left to do whatever they wanted. Some might call it a blessing, but others saw it as a curse. It didn't matter if you were rich or poor, healthy or sick. You had less than a year to do whatever you wanted. After that, your time would run out, and the clockmaker would come back to collect his clock. Now, knowing that they were on borrowed time, the townspeople began to appreciate the little things in life, like the sound of birds singing in the morning or the smell of freshly cut grass. They spent their last days picnicking in the town square, reminiscing about the good old days and making plans for the future. When the clockmaker returned to Oakhaven a year later, he found a town that was full of life and laughter, a town that was living its final moments to the fullest. He tried to collect his clock, but the townspeople refused to give it up. They didn't want to stop counting down. They wanted to keep on ticking.